Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We are happy that you are here with us. Welcome, and kindly feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share where you are joining us from. We are giving the rest of us some 2 minutes to join so that we can start together. Meanwhile, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share where you are joining us from. Thank you for those who are introducing themselves. Kindly feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share where you are joining us from. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you. We are and excited that you are here. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. Welcome those who are joining us. Kindly introduce yourself in the chat and share where you're joining us from. Thank you for those who have introduced themselves. Thank you very much. Continue to introduce yourself in the chat as we wait for others to join us and let us know where you're joining us from. Thank you and very much welcome. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. I think we can start our meeting for today. The rest will be joining us as we continue. Welcome to everyone. We are excited to start this. And before we start, so that we are all together and we can hear each other, I want to give us some housekeeping that one, before we start, we'll have simultaneous interpretation in English, French, and Burmese. To activate, please look for the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. If you are using a laptop or computer, click on it and select your preferred language. This could be English or French or Burmese. We also kindly request that you mute your microphone if you are not speaking. If possible, be in a quiet space so that we can hear you clearly. If you have access to headset, microphone, please use them during the call. And also try to speak slowly wherever you are sharing so that we can capture your message. If the acronyms, please spell them out so that we can get to understand what you mean by them. And again, you are much welcome. Also, because we are joining from different places from different regions, from different countries, we also request that you rename your Zoom name into your proper name and organization. This will help us to know who is in the room and also to be able to track our attendance as well. So, for example, you see that example provided there, Samuel Gay, Grassroots Justice Network. So we kindly request that you also rename yourself so that we can be easily to identify each other and to know who is in the room. Once again, thank you very much. And at this point, I think we can start our meeting. Welcome to everyone. As we continue to join, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and also let us know where you're joining us from. because we'll not be able to get a chance for all of us to introduce themselves using the microphone. So kindly feel free to introduce yourself. And with that, we can start our meeting. My name is Samuel Gay. I am a senior officer, Land and Environmental Justice Initiative in the Grassroots Justice Network, which is convened by NAMAT. In the network, we are a global community of more than 16,000 members from 175 countries, where we bring justice defenders together to connect, learn, and act like what we are doing today. We dream of a world in which the communities most impacted by injustice can defend their rights and take part in the making decisions that affect them. And we are united by a common approach known as legal empowerment, and through which we help and support communities to know law, to be able to use the law, and also to be able to shape the law so that the people most impacted by the injustices can actually exercise their rights and take part in decisions that affect their lives. So the legal empowerment effort is undertaken and led by dedicated community paralegals, because for these community paralegals, they interact with the communities, and for that case, they are able to support and to help people at the grassroots to understand, use, and shape the law. So with that background, with that understanding of the Grass Just Network, I welcome all of you, all of us, to sign up and join this big network so that we can all continue to learn, connect, and act together um, in this network. And for today, we are going to focus on carbon justice, because as members of this grassroots justice network, partners and all of us here from different parts of the world, we found ourselves in different ways responding or supporting communities who are in one way or the other affected, or responding to carbon projects on the line of on the value chain of the carbon markets. And with that, we felt that this is something that brings us, all of us together. It's something that we need to also look into, because it has also injustice issues in it, if not looked in keenly. And that's why, for us as members of the network, we came together for this and focus on carbon justice. And that's why you can see from your screen, we have those different hashtags: carbon justice, the voices we need, and hashtag Article 6.4. All of them speak to this carbon just. But before we get to this discussion, it's good also to get a sense of our interactions with these carbon projects. How do we feel? How do we maybe have an idea of these carbon projects? And with that, we are going to run a short survey or a short poll that will run for like 2 minutes, so that we just get a feel of how we understand these carbon markets, whether we are support communities or whether we direct the communities responding to carbon markets, and what do we think about these markets? Are they good or not? And whether we feel that they are meant to benefit the comment. So we are going to have that poll, which is already on your screen. So kindly feel free to respond to that poll. It's in different languages. We have the first one in English, we have the second one in Burmese, and also in French, so that we can all respond to that. And it will help us to get a feel of these our interaction with our carbon projects, carbon markets. Yeah, I'm giving us a minute to feel. Kindly, you can feel in English, in Burmese, or in French. We have all those three languages there, so kindly feel free to respond to the language that resonates with you most. Um, Giving us one more second. Yeah, I know we are many of us here, so let's keep feeling this. And as we continue with that poll as well, to give us a feel, we're also going to listen to a short video from one of our countries, that is Sierra Leone, to just have also a feel of how communities are actually interacting with these carbon projects and also responding to them, so that we can all get to bring ourselves into this room in terms of these carbon markets, carbon projects, and how our communities are interacting with this, so that we can now get to discuss further why are we talking about this carbon justice. So with the poll, I think We are doing well. I can
For
see
the
we have a lot of responses. So as you go to that, let's also listen to this video to get to feel that. Thank you very much. And I think we can also share the results of the poll. Thank you.
for the carbon
Yeah, thank you. You can see the results from the poll, and if you look keenly on the polls, is that for most of us, in one way or the other, we've interacted with carbon markets, either through some lessons that we understand this, or we are also working with the communities who are responding or are impacted by these carbon projects in one way or the other, and also have our results on what we think about these carbon projects and whether they could benefit or not. But by the end of this call, I think we'll be able to understand further and to know how communities are interacting with this and how can we support each other to ensure that there is justice when it comes to this. But from the video as well, been able to see from the Africa Conservation Initiative, that is the SCI, which was to reduce the rate of deforestation for the mangroves. So in other words, they want to conserve that forestation of mangroves. And this means that the communities who have been depending on these mangroves have to kind of reduce their dependence on this. And that's why you could hear issues around communities feeling powerless because of the forces that are involved, the issues of participation being raised, issues around land rights. Actually, one of them mentioned that community members that they feel though they would not allow someone to take over their land without proper engagement. And there is a lot in that video. To watch it, we'll be sharing a link on the chat. So so that you can be able to watch it in full. But that gives us an idea that communities are actually facing these carbon projects and they're gonna interrupt their way of life in one way or the other. And such experiences and many others from other countries, as we will be hearing from other network members, led the Grassroots Network partners and other stakeholders to come up with some principles which are meant to represent the minimum criteria for communities to thrive amid carbon projects. And we are going to listen to one of us, that's the Vivek, the CEO of NAMAT, on what these principles are and why they are important to us based on those experience that we've had, based on those contexts of Sierra Leone, based on what we've actually shared and what we've witnessed within the communities that we work with, so that we can know understand where did these principles come from and what are they and where are they important. Then from there we'll also be able to listen to more experience from our grassroots just network members and other people who are interact with different communities at community level, at national level, and also at the global level. So at this point, let's listen to a recording from Vivek on these principles.
The Grassroots Justice Network is a community of people from all over who are taking on grave injustice by knowing, using, and shaping the law. And in the last recent couple years, we have been putting our heads together about carbon projects, which are forms of payment for increased absorption of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So for example, a carbon project could be for decreased deforestation, or better management of grasslands. We have come to this from a diversity of countries: Peru, Indonesia, the Philippines, India, Kenya, Sierra Leone. And honestly, we have come to it from diverse perspectives. Some of us have been mostly worried about these projects, worried that they will be a greenwash or an excuse to grab land from communities. Some of us have seen more promise that these might be a valuable way of compensating communities who take care of our most precious ecosystems. But across those diverse perspectives, we have managed to align around a set of 6 carbon justice principles, which we believe, if these markets are going to exist, these principles are necessary to make these markets fair. Number 1, no pay to pollute. Carbon projects must not be an excuse for countries or companies to continue avoidable emissions. If that happens, we are all doomed. Number 2, respect community rights to land and water. And that includes customary rights, whether or not a community has formal legal title, because sometimes when a community doesn't have formal title, that is a legacy of colonialism. Number 3, free prior informed consent. There should be no carbon project unless the community whose land it is has affirmatively accepted the project. And if they want to say no, then the answer is no. The I in FPIC, informed, means communities should have access to key information. For example, all the actors in the transaction, as well as basic financial information, including what is the total gross revenue that the project proponent is receiving when they sell carbon credits on the market. Number 4 is fair compensation. For a land-based project where it is the land that is doing the work, the communities whose land it is should receive at minimum half the gross revenue that the project generates. Anything less than that, we believe, is exploitation. Number 5, fair participation. Fair participation means a few things. Most importantly, the communities whose land it is should not be treated as passive beneficiaries. They should really be allowed to play a leadership role in the work of stewardship, and that includes accessing opportunities for employment and training. Fair participation also means that communities should have access to independent legal support so that they can engage in agreements and enforce agreements in an empowered way. And number 6, enforcement. All of these principles need to be enforced. And that means that governments and standard setting bodies should have robust systems for accountability and oversight. All markets need rules, and carbon markets are no exception. If we can come together across our diversity, we can turn these core principles of carbon justice into binding rules that make these markets fair.
Thank you very much for that. I think that gives us better understanding of these principles around free, prior, informed consent, no pay to pollute, fair compensation, fair participation. All these are meant to help us to see how can we promote justice within these carbon markets. And based on that, and also what we've heard from the Sierra Leone experience, based on that video, we want also to run another short poll to see what are our worries when it comes to some of these projects, where they are and the things that we are supporting. So if we can have that poll coming up. So this poll will help us to internalize these carbon justice principles, to know they are being used, and to also give us a feel on how we can actually apply them, and whether we feel they also can be applied when we are working on land, environment, and climate justice issues. So let's respond to that as we also get 2 or 3 minutes to get some reflections, some questions so far based on the polls, and also what Vivek has presented with the principles and the other colleagues that we've had initially. So at this point, I can open the room for anyone who has a question, anyone who has a reflection, anyone who wants to ask for any clarification or to comment on anything. Kindly feel free. We are going to share the results in a minute. If you have any question on these principles, you can also feel free to post it on the chat. And I think we can now share the results so far, the ones that we are having, so that we can just see what each and every one of us is feeling about these principles and these carbon markets. And as we look into that, we are also going to get into another discussion just to get to understand more from some of our network members who have actually interacted with these principles. Some of them have worked with different stakeholders at the community level, also at the national level, at the global level, and to see how these principles can be used, how these principles can be incorporated, these principles can be of help at those different levels. So that even as we invite all of us today, as we launch this campaign on carbon justice, we have guidance on, also we have some stories that we can actually be able to share and tell a story from how the communities are being impacted, how we are feeling about this, and we can now have that collaboration or build that solidarity to push for this fairness and justice in these carbon markets. So if we can have the results as well for the poll before we invite our discussants. Thank you. Yeah, you can see the response that we are getting, what people feel about this. Whether, like for the first question, I am worried about how the community land rights are going to be impacted by carbon justice, and you can see majority actually agree that they are affected, how they feel worried about how this will affect the lands of the communities. And maybe it's because some of the lands are community lands, which maybe we are worried about the ownership, the Latin rights. We also have worried about communities being able to participate fully in these negotiations, which majority of us agree that actually we are worried. Maybe it's because of access to this information. Are we informed? Are we consulted? Are we given those opportunities? I am worried about individuals and groups being safe if they speak about these carbon projects, and this about the safety of environmental defenders, our justice defenders as well. So how can we work together? How can we use these principles, or how have we used these principles to kind of help us to address some of these issues? And with this, allow me to invite our discussants. We are going to have a short panel discussion, just listen to some of our network members who have actually experienced this, who have gone through this. And today we are having our three speakers. One is Elijah, who is a pastoralist and advocate embodying communities across northern Kenya. He's currently the program officer for Impact, a Kenyan NGO which helps pastoralist communities across the northern Kenya to understand and claim their um, collective tenure rights. And actually, they're responding to carbon projects. And he'll be sharing with us shortly. We are also joined by Manal, who is a lawyer and a researcher whose work lies at the intersection of documentation, research, and advocacy on forest and wildlife conservation policies in India. So we are going to get Indian experience as well. So um, Elijah is from Kenya, which is in Africa. Menal is from India, so that's Asian content. And also we have Shamiso, who's the deputy director of the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, ZILA, where you oversees program designing, fundraising, and operations. And you'll be sharing with us from a global perspective on how these principles have been applied. And we'll get to hear more from them. So just to start with Elijah, to get
Hi, Sam.
his,
I'm sorry. I just wanted to
yes,
remind
Nikki.
everyone, including the panel speakers, to please slow down so that our interpreters can translate and interpret your messages slowly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niji, for that. So, yeah, good for that. Remember that because you have interpretation, we kind of speak slowly, and maybe I spoke fast. Apologies for that, colleagues. So, we are going to start with Elijah. Just say hi to us, and also kindly share with us briefly how you and your organization as well got involved in carbon projects, and maybe what are some of the biggest justice issues that you've encountered along the way or as you interact with these carbon projects. Yeah, Elijah, you are welcome, please.
Thank you, Samuel. And good morning, everyone. So my name is Elijah Empira. I work with an organization called Impact Kenya, based in Kenya. We are an Indigenous peoples organization, and mainly we work on land issues. So how Impact got involved in this carbon credit space? It's because we work in northern Kenya as supporting indigenous communities to secure their tenure rights. And where we work, these communities are also beneficiaries of carbon credit money, particularly under one of the biggest soil carbon projects, the Northern Grassland Carbon Credit Project. And of course, through the normal interaction with communities, where we are supporting them to meet the requirement for registration of community lands, you're able to learn and to interact with communities. You learn what's happening, and through that, now you also we came to really understand the existence of a project in the community lands with some key issues that communities have been able to raise for some time particularly around the project itself. So that's how we got involved in this carbon credit space ourselves, more or less advocating for communities' involvement in the processes. So that calls for you to understand the project itself, and then you can then guide communities on what to do and what approaches they can use to be able to respond to some of the issues they are facing. Beside that, I also come from one of the community lands which benefits from carbon credit money. My community land is called Kweija Community Land under Naibonga Lower Conservancy in Laikipia County. And the fact that I'm a member of that community land, I can easily follow the discussions happening at the community level to understand how the project is doing and what are some of the issues communities are grappling with. So I think that's how we got involved in this space of carbon credits. Yeah, in terms of justice issues that we were able to see that communities are experiencing in our context is the ambiguity in carbon markets. There's access to information is particularly one of the major issues communities are facing. Yeah, we have these projects, but not really everybody understands anything about them, particularly the communities themselves. Most of them don't even have the access to information. Some of the documentation that ideally they should have as the owners of the land. And it's also lack of clarity in benefit sharing modalities and the rationale on how this was done. So those are some another key part of justice issue that we see within our communities. And the other one is on FPIC processes, how our community is involved in the process. Did everybody really get a chance to go through this documentation and to agree to the process itself? That's another big issue in communities. And the other one that we've been able to see as those are justice issues, it's about involvement of communities. That will be in two ways. You have the community at large, and not necessarily everybody have been involved in that process. We also have recognized community institutions like the community land management committees, and most of them in some areas were never involved in this. They didn't really understand how this came into play and who are consented to the project on behalf of the communities, considering these are the people who've been given a mandate under the Community Land Act to manage community land on behalf of the communities. Yeah, so from my context and where we work, I believe those are some of the justice issues, or the main justice issues that we see and communities are dealing with in our area. Yeah, so I'll stop from there. Thank you, Samuel.
Thank you very much, Elijah, for highlighting that. I think you've highlighted very key issues around free, prior, informed consent, which actually underpins how the community, how the other stakeholders are going to participate and also to be involved in some of these projects. And there is another very important part of it based on benefit sharing. And if you connect with what we had from the Sierra Leone video as well, is that promises are made to committees, sometimes they are not fulfilled. So those kind of worries, I think, also come into this, whereby we are talking of benefit sharing, and maybe in some context, it could be that we are talking of sharing benefits, which we don't know how much of these benefits are there. And I think that also links to what you mentioned on access to information and what information and what. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Maybe I can pose the same question to Menal as well. Maybe you can also tell us how you and your organization got involved in this carbon project, and maybe what are one or two, three injustice issues that you've encountered. Manal, to you.
Thanks, Samuel. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. So my work has been centered around advocacy and research on forest governance in India and how to democratize it, because we actually had very strict forest laws that created a lot of issues with rights and tenure justice for local communities. And in this way, we've worked with a lot of indigenous and local communities across India. And for the past 5 years or so, we are beginning to realize that carbon projects are slowly making inroads into the territories of the communities that we work with. And we found ourselves quite incapable of dealing with these carbon projects because, as members of local NGOs and civil society, we ourselves were very unprepared for what these carbon projects are, how they are operationalized, um, and also we were learning along with the communities that we are working with in terms of what kind of promises that project proponents came in with. And some of these promises were very relevant to what community members have been asking for many, many years, including support in conservation activities and financial support as well. So for us, we got involved in this because we needed to be educated ourselves about what carbon markets were and how projects were, whether projects would be able to support the communities that we worked with. So that's how we've gotten involved. Some of the biggest justice issues that we've encountered are that there is no clarity regarding what a carbon project is. So from the inception to the start of the process to the actual when the process starts, there is no clarity by the project proponents. Uh, there's also no clarity on the nature of the projects, whether they are just payment for ecological services, because that is usually what project proponents approach communities with, but they do not mention the fact that these projects are going to be generating credits. And so it's really important for people to understand what is it exactly that they are getting into. The other issue is that a lot of these projects are coming up on community land or common lands, but the agreements are made one on one. So it's between one family or one individual, and several agreements like this with individuals to create a carbon project. And this kind of then leaves the community in a lurch if the projects do not take off or if there is some sort of failure within the projects. The third, actually, which is a very serious issue, is that India does not have any grievance redressal mechanism built into its laws and policies. So that is a huge sort of justice issue that we are dealing with at the national level. And also, these are highly technical processes which involve very different kind of not many people, including CSOs like ours, understand the process of how credits are generated. The science behind it is still very, very unclear to many of us. And so we also feel that there is a lack of information, like Elijah was mentioning as well, in terms of the carbon projects in general.
Thank you very much, Manal, for sharing that. And I think something that is coming up and also was mentioned by Elijah is that these carbon markets, carbon projects, credits, it's kind of complex issue, which even the comment sometimes not well, they don't understand what is this thing we are getting ourselves into. And I think that also brings another confusion because if you look into how the projects are run in other sectors, like in the extractive sector, mining, sometimes communities are required to relocate, and they are compensated, they are settled. In the carbon projects, there is one part that communities, this your land, you are going to be here. On that side, we are signing this agreement. So that kind of convention, I think, it's also coming out that kind of clarity on what is this we are getting into, how will this project operate. I think that's something that is also cutting across, which is very important. And then also on the issue of grievance mechanism, how do we and where do we raise our grievance, how do we have them addressed? And I think that's another question which probably we can all share with what Manala has present. Thanks very much for that. And maybe the same so that we can also get from global perspective. Shamiso, can you share with us as well how Zila and you've been involved or got involved in these carbon projects, maybe at a higher level, and what are some of the biggest justice issues that you've also encountered? Shamiso.
Thank you, Samuel. Good morning, everyone. So I work with the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, ZELA. So it's a public interest environmental law group based in Zimbabwe. We have quite a number of projects and programs that we are implementing, but one of them relates to climate change and energy. So under that project, we have been assessing the impact of carbon credit projects in Zimbabwe on communities. But we have been approaching this from a legal perspective. So our role is basically to analyze existing or proposed legislation and understand or unpack its implications on local communities. So we've managed to do that because Zimbabwe developed national legislation related to carbon trading last year. But the legislation has undergone some changes when it comes to community benefits by removing some provisions that reserved a certain percentage of the benefits for communities, leaving 70% of project revenue to project proponents or project developers, and then 30% to government. So we ended up analyzing that piece of legislation, what it means for investments, what it means for the local communities. So we've also been raising issues around how will communities benefit from carbon credits projects. And I think like the speaker mentioned, the issue of one, lack of adequate knowledge about how carbon markets work or function is a key issue. Two, protection of the rights of communities, in particular those who may be displaced or who may face challenges when it comes to access to the resources which traditionally they have been facing. So with all that, we ended up applying to be a member of the Article 6.4 Accreditation Expert Panel. I'm a member of the that panel, which falls under the UNFCCC, and the role and function of the Article 6.4 expert panel is basically to assess reports from designated operational entities. Maybe I might have to just give a very, very brief description of what are designated operational entities. When it comes to Article 6.4, so Article 6.4 is what is now called the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism. Remember, it also replaced CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism. So all projects will now be registered under the Article 6.4 as part of the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism. So designated operational entities whose capabilities we assess are the bodies that play a crucial role in assessing and validating activities implemented under the Paris Agreement So those institutions are very, very, very key. These are the validating and verification entities. They are important in the sense that their reports assures the market or even assures the communities whenever there's a project which is being assessed that it is credible, it is legitimate, and that it was done properly. You might be aware that there have been challenges around the carbon credit market being considered as fake, a scam, lacking transparency and accountability, and also resulting in communities being deprived of their rights, leading now to the development of the carbon these carbon principles that we are talking about. So the point I'm trying to make is that at that level, I participate in ensuring that designated operational entities that verifies and that validates carbon credits are legitimate and that they are using the right tools and methodologies in terms of ensuring that carbon credits deliver the value that they are supposed to deliver. So the verification role of designated operational entities is very, very important. And we look at those reports. And then once we look at the reports that are done by assessment teams, we then recommend to the supervisory body for accreditation of designated operational entities so that they can go out there and do the assessments. So that's the kind of work that we do. But we then input elements from the carbon justice principles into the work of the supervisory body through the recommendations and also into the work of the accreditation expert panel by raising issues around community rights, by raising issues around compensation, free prior informed consent, and even enforcement issues. So those are the kind of things that we raise representing civil society in the process. But at a national level, if I can just also indicate that at a national level, we try to link community interest with global processes, and that's very crucial because some of these rules and procedures around carbon credit trading, whether in the voluntary market or in the compliance market, are set or are informed or should be informed by community experience. So as an organization, we provide that link between the grassroots and the global. So that's how we try to make sure that at least we influence law reforms at the national level and also global discussions. So I'll stop there because we don't have enough time, but happy to answer any questions. Yeah, over to you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shamiso, for sharing what you are doing, especially on the policy and legal frameworks. And also, actually, what was interesting was how you are using these carbon justice principles to influence some of those policy decision processes, the use of ensuring that FPIC, that is free prior informed consent, issues around fair compensation, and all these other things we are calling out in these principles are incorporated into both the national and also the international frameworks. And I think I'll pose the same question to Menal and Elijah, especially on how at the different levels, Elijah at the community level, probably, how are you also using carbon justice? We've heard from Shamiso from the global space and also to some extent the national level. But also for you, Elijah, maybe how are you using these carbon just principles in your work at the community level? Probably you can share some highlights on that briefly.
Thank you, Samuel. Yeah, so from our own context, at the grassroots level, the community level, we believe that when you're talking about indigenous peoples and land, and then you bring carbon credit projects in play, so you can't separate indigenous peoples and land because their land is their culture, is their identity. So for us, we advocate for recognition and protection of indigenous peoples' lands and territories. So that's where we begin every advocacy and movement towards carbon markets. It starts with indigenous peoples owning their lands. So for us, it supersedes any kind of investments that happens in their land. And for, in this particular context in northern Kenya, so we have an ongoing project, the Northern Grassland Carbon Credit Project. So in this essence, what, or rather their strategies we are using is it's now to respond to the existing projects, things that perhaps that were done were not right, how the project started, involvement of communities. So now we're looking at how do we ensure that communities get the best terms in this space, and what we are doing is more or less building and strengthening social movements for communities to collectively demand for their rights at the community level, including carbon rights, land tenure, and all that. So we've been able to bring all these communities together to collectively bargain for their rights. And for the reason why we decided to do this, for it to go as a collective bargaining unit, is because sometimes it's easier for projects, perhaps carbon project proponents or other investors, easily override communities and maybe not necessarily involving communities in the processes if the communities are moving in isolation or they are not necessarily speaking as one. So we believe that when these communities come together and they speak as a unified front, that gives them the power to engage project proponents and all actors in this particular space, which is fairly new to these communities. So that's our strategy approach we are using to ensure that communities are able to get spaces and audience with the relevant actors in carbon credit, with key asks that communities need, that needs to be responded to. And so we bring these communities, around 27 communities, together to push for their rights, asking questions on information, access to information, documentation that involves the project, the agreements that were signed, which actually communities never saw those documents, but only a few people had copies. And then also ask questions on benefit sharing, the formula, how was this done, what's the rationale for these kind of percentages, and also demanding for communities involvement, ensuring every person at the community level is involved in the all stages of the project, and also to recognize the institutions that have been created under the new law in Kenya, Community Land Act, to be at the forefront in terms of management of community natural resources. So that's how we are approaching this in our context, because it's already an existing project. So you are now trying to rectify things that happened way before. So at least when we were able to bring these communities together, they ended up getting some of the documentation that they never had, including the agreements. They wrote several letters to project proponents, and eventually they're able to receive some documents showing some of the key things they were asking as communities. So that's our approach in terms of using the principles, the carbon credit principles. Beside that, we also organize communities, not necessarily just in northern Kenya, but across the country, under an umbrella that is called Community Land Owners Alliance of Kenya, which brings all these communities, targeting every county that has a community land in Kenya, in such a way that when communities speak in Northern Kenya, not necessarily just communities in Northern Kenya speaking, but all communities across the country, pushing for all these key asks that communities need. So that's our approach. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Elijah. Allow me to interrupt you at that point. I know you'll elaborate that because I saw a question somewhere which I'll be posing to you later to expound further on that point as you respond to that question. So at this moment, allow me also to invite Menal to also share with us based on the Indian context, how they're also applying these Cambodia's principles at national level. Menal, please.
Thanks, Samuel. So, basically, India is at a very nascent level in terms of really, sort of, like I said, address redressal mechanisms around around carbon markets. And for us, because we are active at the national level, we had when the carbon markets had actually started, the voluntary carbon market had actually started 5 years ago coming into India. We had created a small sort of informal group of CSOs at the national level to actually look at this and educate ourselves, like I said. So we did know we we did know that there were some aspects that we wanted enshrined into some of the laws and policies that are already existing or are coming up. But at the same time, we didn't know how to articulate it. So principles like carbon rights or carbon justice um, were not framed in our minds. And the carbon justice principles and our participation actually in the carbon rights course that happened last year, it really helped us to understand what is it that our national laws need to enshrine into as even as the domestic market laws are coming up in India. So it was very important for us to actually go through these principles and to see how we can apply these principles as the national laws are coming up, and how do we insert these principles into the into the national laws. So for us, it's been very helpful to not just collaborate on bringing these principles out as part of the course that we did last year, but also to then apply these to our contexts in India. We also know that India is actually the second largest carbon credit generation market in the country in the world right now. Yet we do not have laws like the laws from Kenya or from Zimbabwe that actually talk about benefit sharing. In fact, the laws that are coming up do not have this aspect at all. They do not consider credit generators at all. There are very bureaucratic structures that have been created that just sort of highlight how the mechanism is to be developed, how the carbon market is to be developed in the country. But the issue of rights or justice has not been addressed at all. And the carbon rights principles are actually helping us to put these into place in our national laws and policies. So that's how we have incorporated, and we're hoping that when the consultations on these laws and on these schemes and processes start, we are able to input these ideas into the national laws. Also, from because they are also borrowed from experiences of people like Elijah, where carbon credit markets have entered into local communities. And it's really important for India to put these principles into place, I think, as we start creating laws and policies for ourselves. So, yes.
Thank you very much, Menal, for raising that. And I like also to connect that with what Elijah mentioned on how they are approaching or they are using these principles, especially on the part of collective bargaining, that collaboration, working together as a unit, that common language. And I think that kind of solidarity, that kind of joining our efforts. It's actually also what we are calling all of us, maybe in this call, to see how can we, all of us, connect and learn from each other and be able to act together as a unit to ensure that all this information we are asking for, all this clarification, all these complex issues around the carbon projects may be kind of demystified to ensure that each and every one of us understands and they can engage from a point of understanding. And those are great points which are coming across, which probably they will also help us or trigger us to join all of us in this a movement to see how can we foster justice in these carbon markets, in these carbon projects. And at this point, allow me to open the floor for questions from our participants, from our audience. If you have a question, can you feel free to raise your hand. And as we do that, I also read some questions that are on the chat. There is one specific to Elijah from Mia from Nasheria. Is asking, I have a question for Ledger. How do you see the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative manifesting in northern Kenya? Is there likely to be an expansion in carbon credit schemes across different parts of the northern Kenya, like Garissa soon? That's a question to you. Elijah will also be respond to that or speak to that. There is another one from Albina to our speakers, that carbon credit projects has complex terms, as we've admitted, and definitions that communities do not understand as it concerns the hair being traded. How will you scale up? How will you scale up on this for them to understand? And a second question, how will you assure them of the long-term effects of the carbon credit? From the experience, the project is prone to displacement and its possession making people or communities landless. So that's an issue around land, which has been asked to our panelists. Another question, carbon credits abstract and understanding, how can we ensure the government be transparent? So I'll start with you. I see Esbon. Let me give an opportunity to our participants to also speak. Esbon, you can go first, then you come to Elijah to respond to the first question. Esbon, please.
It's almost noon. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to appreciate this opportunity, maybe to have all this knowledge for those who are actually pursuing the justice within the community. And maybe one of my concerns is actually maybe within the Kisumu, this is actually is just like a new term and something that as a community that we also need maybe to pursue it, so that as we continue to plant more of the trees, how will the community be able to benefit on that? And if there's a community that is actually putting their land for the tree production, for the carbon credit, how can we be able to have this knowledge so that we can be able to do awareness or advocacy at the community level, so that each and everyone may be able to be conversant with this? I just want to appreciate you, Samuel, maybe bringing different people within the Kenya who are actually at the carbon credit creditation within their community. And we also looking at this, how can we also be cooperated into this learning so that we can be able to bring it down within our community? That is actually my concern. And thank you very much for this as an opportunity.
Thank you very much, Esbon. I know our panelists will be sharing some of the experiences. How do we connect? How do we also bring this knowledge to the grassroots level? I see, Danis, your aunt is up as well. I can give you the opportunity. Danis Omond.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
please.
you so much. My name is Danis Omondi. I'm an environmental expert and also a waste management consultant. Something that is very much intriguing, that is, I'm actually would really want to know how we can tailor make this into the waste segment, because I understand plastic waste is actually a major environmental challenge facing the global, and Kenya particularly is also on this bracket. I would want to know, the panelists to share input. Is plastic, because I was working on a program that is enhancing plastic control. I would want to know whether plastic innovation can also be tailored into, reaping into the gains of carbon credit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and I can give this opportunity to our panelists to respond to those two questions. And also to respond to that, Elijah, there is the other question of what do you think of these carbon projects being expanded into the other parts of the northern Kenya, like Garissa, in the near future? Maybe we can start with that.
Thank you, Samuel. For that question, how I see this manifesting in northern Kenya, particularly from me, I see our government is at the forefront in terms of ensuring that carbon credit projects are happening in our country, and that's why we are putting legislations in place to regulate the market itself. So I see this as maybe a way to entice even more projects in the country. And of course, to me, now targeting further areas in northern Kenya poses a threat to communities, especially communities that are yet to secure their tenure rights, considering how the dynamics are in the country at the moment. Some of these communities are yet to even pursue or even to understand what the law says in terms of securing their land. So I see that as, yes, the government is pushing for carbon markets, but not necessarily doing the same in terms of ensuring that these communities have been able to be supported to secure their collective tenure rights. That's something that I see as a threat to communities eventually. I think this space has a lot of money. A lot of money is involved, and that attracts investors, politicians, and all these people. And to me, those are some of the things that worries in terms of community space in this carbon market. Yeah, so that's maybe how I could respond to that question. Communities are at disadvantage stage when government is only pushing for carbon market, not necessarily looking at their rights on the land. And that's where it should start. It should start with communities owning the land before any kind of investment happens.
Thank you very much for that, Elijah. And I think Shamis and Minal also you can speak to this other question from Esbon and also from Albina on how do we bring this information? Probably maybe you have some experience on how we simplify some of these information and bring them to grassroots so that this aspect, this concept of carbon trading air, as Albina has shared, how do we bring this to the ground? How can we collaborate in this? Maybe you have some experience that you can share on this.
Yeah,
Sure,
thanks.
Sam.
Maybe we
Go
can start
ahead.
with Manal,
Go ahead,
then we
Mel.
come. Yes, yes. Manal, please.
Okay. Of course, some of the technical and scientific calculations of carbon credits are very, very difficult to understand, and that's also our shortcoming because mm, who calculates these credits, right? So that is an area of ambiguity that I think all of us are facing because it is done at a very high level. However, when we are talking to communities and when proponents are coming to communities, they are coming with the promise of financial resources. And for us, it is important to break down some of the agreements that project proponents are coming with, so that they are able to have some sort of accountability to the people that they are making these agreements with. So it's important for CSOs involved in processes such as these to ensure that there is a level of accountability in terms of what is it exactly that this project is going to do. How can you best explain it to the community that you expect is going to be a partner with you in this process? So these are the kind of issues that need support, that communities need support with. However, to us, it is still a challenge to actually figure out how the calculations are done because, like I think Elijah mentioned, that these are very difficult documents to even get hold of. And that remains a gray area. And this is something that we need to bring up at our national levels so that when our governments are going to COPs and negotiating these decisions, it is important that our governments of the global south speak out on behalf of the communities that are being affected in their countries, and that is something that can only happen when CSOs and NGOs and people working with grassroots at the grassroots level actually push the governments and local lawmakers to take up these issues. In some cases, it's difficult. In some countries where the rule of law does not exist, we understand that it becomes very difficult. And the larger issue of whether carbon markets are the best solution or no still remains. But I think we have to do the best with whatever is coming into these territories that we work with, and to ensure that people at least have the basic understanding of what these markets are and how they can ensure that the agreements that are happening are clear, and have some sort of grievance redressal at the national level.
Thank you very much, Menal, for that. And as Shamiso comes in to respond, also to add into that, I would also like you, because you mentioned you playing a role in influencing some of these policies at the national and also at the global spaces. And there is a question that came on the chat: how can we ensure that government is transparent in these mechanisms? And as we continue um, to demand for these civil society organizations, are there any positive impacts on this? If at all we can be able to hold these governments are accountable, but also the other comments which are coming, which you can see from the chart, that the civil society organization can also play a great role in supporting communities to understand this. If you have this information, how do we also bring it down? Civil society organizations who are working with these. So we can also continue to follow through the chat, but Shamiso, you can respond to that also.
Thank you, Sam. So I'll try to be brief. So I think it's always very difficult to communicate a message that resonate well with local communities when you are dealing with a product that you cannot touch, that you cannot see. I mean, carbon dioxide and the trade of carbon dioxide. So that means explaining things in terms of how the carbon market the carbon market architecture is arranged. It becomes very, very, very difficult. However, we can try as much as possible. What we've also been trying to do is to talk about carbon rights. By carbon rights, and I think some of the principles definitely relate to the carbon justice principles. We are talking about the procedural aspects related to how communities should be involved or be consulted whenever government is engaging with a project proponent, or if there's someone who wants to access certain land for setting up a carbon credit project, they should consult the communities. That's in terms of the rights. Then they should also compensate the communities if they are going to deprive the communities of access to that land, which is also another right perspective. Then if communities have certain environmental rights, for example, we can also talk about those rights in a simple language, which they can easily understand from their situation or from how they interact with nature at the local level. If it is access to land, for example, we will say for the next 50 years, this project is likely to result in you not accessing, not using certain resources from this land. They may understand that better. So it's important to do that. However, when it comes to trading, it's like cryptocurrency, to explaining how cryptocurrency works. I'm sure as communities get sophisticated, apologies for using that word, as communities develop, I'm sure with time, people will start to understand what it all means. Because with new generations, Generation Z and others that are coming up, it is possible that they will start appreciating and understanding these things. So I think it's better to explain things from a very simple, using simple language, language which they understand. But sometimes it's also difficult to break down certain big words in the science sector, methodologies, carbon dioxide and things like that. It's always difficult. But however, we are trying to explain it from a rights perspective and also from a natural resources perspective. When it comes to the issues to do with the government not being transparent, I think that has always been a major problem in many of the countries where carbon credits projects are happening. I can give an example of Zimbabwe, where government and even the private sector, government itself was not even aware that at some point that there was a project called Kariba Red, where communities, local authorities were implementing carbon credit projects, but government was not aware because of lack of sharing of information. And then the communities themselves were not even aware of what it is that they were doing, what kind of project it is that they were doing, and what was being earned there in terms of the revenues. They were not aware. So there was lack of transparency and accountability there. But let's also position this within the global system where the different governments are supposed to report on their NDCs and nationally determined contributions. If there's going to be any emission reduction, they have to make sure that they capture that data in the global reporting database or the registry that will be established at the national level and also at the international level under Article 6.4. So that information sharing may help when it comes to transparency and accountability so that there is no double counting of emission reductions or removals. So, but this takes time in building capacity so that states are able to effectively capture data and information and then share that information. Apologies for taking long, but
Yeah.
I think that those are some of the measures.
Thank you, Shamis. I was about to stop you before you become now a bit technical with removals and emissions. But thanks very much for sharing that. I think it resonates with what Ajibaki has also posted in the chat about access to information, awareness. And allow me to read one comment that came from Mesan from Benin, who says that Benin has a law on carbon market, but nothing has been done to apply it. Even government officials don't really understand how carbon credit work before putting it to practice. And the organization is trying to make the law its own and to make the administration understand it. But so where we find an opportunity, we need to chip in and try to support our communities, especially for that case, to understand these projects or to understand this legal process, even as the laws are being formulated, what role can we play as well to support all these other stakeholders so that we can get right and we can have justice in these carbon markets. And that's why even for this call, we are going to formally invite all of us to join our efforts together so that we can see how can we use principles to advocate both at the global level, at the national level, and at the local level for these 6 principles, which we feel they can form the minimum criteria for communities to thrive in these carbon projects. And with that, allow me to just give our panelists 1 second just to share their final word. Elijah, your final word, please, in 2 seconds.
Thank you, Samuel. It's good that we'll be able to get this opportunity to share and learn from each other. My last word would be we need to come together as a unit. That's the only way for us to be able to respond to these issues, particularly on this space, which is fairly new to us as Indigenous peoples. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Elijah. Menal, in a second.
Yeah, I would like to second what Elijah has also said is that it is really important to learn from each other, especially in the national context. Some of the great work that Kenyan civil society has put forth to bring a very strongly worded uh, amendment to the legislation, and they're still pushing for it, is something that really helps us in India to to take to our local authorities as well as regional, sub-regional, and national governments, so that they are able to enshrine some of these principles in law. And I think it is really important for governments actually to step in, because it is a voluntary market and markets are volatile, but there is a need for governments to enshrine these principles in some of the laws and schemes that are coming up, so that if there is a problem, citizens of the country can go and ask for justice at the government level. So I think that is important for national governments to also recognize.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much. Shamis, do you have a word? You've already said yours, but I can give you a second.
Okay, I think for me, it's about making sure that the carbon justice principles are used or adopted widely by different organizations and movements that are interested in following up on carbon credit projects around the world. So I think these principles are very, very key. So that would be my message, ensuring that they are adopted widely.
Thank you very much for that. And at this point, allow me to invite my colleague who will take us through the very final session of this webinar we're having today, and to just tell us where we are going to move next from this discussion. Nick, please,
Thank you,
if you can take it
Sam.
off.
Thank you, Sam. Can I confirm that you can hear me clearly?
Yes, please, we can.
Thank you. Mingalaba, mayang hapon sa inyong tanan. Magandang hapon sa lahat. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Dominic Calanyas. You can call me Nikki. I work with Namati and the Grassroots Justice Network. I wanted to acknowledge first and thank Elijah, Shamiso, and Minal for sharing those stories, for sharing the importance of the carbon justice principles we are launching today. And the second thing I wanted to mention before anything else is that we wanted to acknowledge again that the carbon justice campaign has been going on for quite some time now through the work you are doing, through the work our members are doing. As you heard, Mina was saying that in India they were handling trainings for forest and wildlife laws with indigenous peoples and local communities. And in Kenya, Elijah was saying that they are working on indigenous peoples' collective tenure rights before carbon markets were globally a thing. And so we know this call is worded as a launch, but we just wanted to acknowledge first and foremost that the work you are doing is not new, and your work has been going on for a longer time. And that being said, the formal or official kickoff of the carbon justice principles you're looking at your screen is building on our collective wins, either big or small, either wherever you're working on community or at national level or in global spaces. And through your experiences, through our collective experiences, we really made these principles actionable and practical. Our work on land, environment, and climate justice also heavily relies on other equally important areas of work, namely community organizing, collective learning, access to justice, security, protection, among others. And so we also wanted to highlight that apart from our work on carbon justice, our network, the Grassroots Justice Network, also connects members together through three working groups. First, on gender, second, on climate finance, and third, on community engagement. We also learn together about the power of legal empowerment through virtual opportunities like our flagship course, Open Now. We're also acting together on many fronts, including working towards a new way to fund support for communities responding to land-based investment. There's a lot going on within the network. I assure you there's a lot going on, especially with the end of the year coming up. And you can learn all about these opportunities by signing up for our working groups and our newsletter, which were shared in the chat. It's in French, in Burmese, and in English. So please, we look forward to looking for your registration for our newsletter and our working groups. We know that our time together now in this call comes to a close, and we wanted to take a moment and pause for maybe 3 to 5 minutes. We know that the fight for carbon justice will mainly be in community meetings with project developers. And of course, we know that the fight will also be in courtrooms, away from friends and allies, away from the people in this room. We have 98 of you in this virtual room, and I'm very happy to have familiar faces, and especially from Myanmar, who's facing severe democratic backsliding. And we know that we can only bring so many people together across the world to make the principles a reality. And right now, the next big fight is starting this weekend at COP29. There's big momentum towards COP29. And as you might all know, COP29's overall goal is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And from what we know, this year's COP will focus on scaling up climate finance. This means governments and negotiators at COP next weekend, starting next weekend, will want to finalize Article 6. This was mentioned by Shamiso earlier. Article 6, what is Article 6? It's the main provision dealing with carbon markets and emissions trading. And in fact, in a letter written by the host government of Azerbaijan dated July, just this year, I quote, "The COP29 presidency is committed to finalizing the operationalization of Article 6 as a priority," end of quote. So next weekend, the negotiations, the global negotiations for Article 6 will be starting, and they want to finalize it. Now, the current draft of Article 6 does not reflect any of our principles. The current draft does not respect community rights to land and water. It does not make it clear that payments should not be a substitute for avoidable emissions. It also does not recognize that communities should lead the stewardship, nor does it give the power to communities to determine how payments should be spent. We know that our principles should be heard by many people, including governments, including country negotiators, including carbon project developers, including ministers. And so we just wanted to take a moment and pause, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, as time allows. We invite you to use the power of social media and shout for these principles online. We invite you to post in your preferred social media account wherever you're comfortable with: LinkedIn, Facebook, X, WhatsApp, or even TikTok if you're comfortable, about how we need the carbon justice principles, especially during COP29 negotiations. You can see in your screen that we're using the hashtag carbon justice and we're using the hashtag the voices we need and article 6.4. My colleagues will be sharing a document in the chat which shows you sample posts or sample tweets which you can make. Here's a sample tweet we just posted, just for your reference. If you have access to opening the document, you can see that the post reads, "We were told a carbon project was coming to our land, but our voices were ignored. Real justice means respecting our connection to the land, hashtag carbon justice." So please feel free to use this time. We're pausing for 2 to 5 minutes to post how we need the carbon justice principles in social media. If it's safe for you to do so, we encourage you to tag your ministries or your government representatives or your national delegations who's coming to COP next week so they get notified when you post. Again, only if it's safe for you to do so. If for any reason at all you don't feel safe using social media, you can use our Zoom chat here. You can use this virtual Zoom chat we have. So you can post your tweet, and with your permission, we will post the statement for you. Again, you can post the tweet or post in any language you're comfortable with, and we're pausing for 2 to 3 minutes. Again, you can feel free to use the chat if you're not comfortable with using social media, and the hashtag we're using is on your screen. If you're done posting, feel free to let us know in the chat as well. We know we're a bit over time, and we will end the call in a few minutes. Okay. Keeping in mind we are exactly at 5:30 Philippine time. At this point, before we officially close, if you are going to COP next weekend, please feel free to email us at leji@namati.org. The Grassroots Justice Network members will be there, and we will be advocating for the principles which we are just launching today. Again, if you're going to COP, please feel free to email us at leji@namati.org. And at this point, I'd like to invite everyone to turn on your cameras for a brief moment to take a group photo. If you're not comfortable turning on your camera, that's okay. Thank you, everyone. Ms. Yoka, let us know if you've taken the group photo. Sam, Ms. Yoka, the group photo is okay at this point?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. The photo has been taken. At this point, I invite Samuel to officially close the launch call. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you very much for that session. And thanks to all of us for joining us here today, for engaging and having that interactive section. Thank you so much to our interpreters for supporting us and helping us to be able to connect with each other. Thank you all for being part of this important discussion and also for helping us and also joining us in this Couple Just campaign. And we hope that you are going to continue this engagement even beyond this conversation, especially in our social media platforms and also in digital spaces with our communities and other spaces that we operate in or work with. So let's stay connected and keep the momentum of this campaign going so that we can have these principles incorporated in our benefit sharing agreements, in our national policies, and also in the international frameworks. Have a great day or evening, and thank you again. Bye to everyone. Thank you very much. Let's keep connecting in the social media. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Merci à tout le monde. Merci.
Bye bye, Nikki. Bye bye, Sami.
Elijah. Bye bye.
Bye, Michael.
Thank you, everyone.
Elijah.